Hello, I'm Michelle Anderson, your host of Constitution Conversations. Today we're going to have a conversation with Ken Welch. He is a commissioner on the Pinellas County Commission. He's going to talk with us today about the system of checks and balances, which are an important function of our United States Constitution. We're meeting here today at the St. Petersburg Police Department. It is a place where the County Commission often meets. It's also a time for us now to stop and reflect on the role of our Constitution and our constitutional rights to peaceably assemble, and the role and responsibilities of our law enforcement community. So this week, the students are going to be learning about the systems of checks and balances that our Constitution has built in. Can you explain to our students a little bit about what are checks and balances?
I can. The framers of the Constitution understood that people were imperfect. And if you look at the way our country started, there was a lot of imperfection there. Women and African Americans couldn't vote. Slavery was a long part of our history. So they understood that we were imperfect, but the aim was to become a more perfect union. And so they built a system where the Constitution could be amended. But to the separation of powers, they didn't want to concentrate power in the hands of any one person, like a king in Britain, or any one organization like Parliament or Congress. So they built a system that had a separation of powers between the legislative branch, which is Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, the executive branch, which is the president, and the judicial branch, or the courts, which is the Supreme Court and all the courts beneath it. They felt by having that separation of powers that they could avoid a lot of the bad things that happened in Britain. This system of government has proven itself to be the most sustainable and fair in the world. So that's why we have that separation of powers. The checks and balances really means that each branch of government can check the power of the other branches. So legislative, for example, Congress, their main job is to create laws. They also have some budget authority to fund government. The executive branch, or the president, has to administer those laws and administer the government. And the Supreme Court, or the judiciary, rules on the constitutionality of both the laws that were created by legislative and the way that those laws are being administered by the executive. What can those branches do to check the power of the other? So the legislative branch, Congress, can create a law, but the president can veto it. He can say, I don't like that law, I don't agree with it, so I'm going to veto it. So that is a check of the president on the power of the Congress. But it can go back to Congress, and they have the power to override a presidential veto if they get 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to override the veto power of the president. The Senate also gets to approve the appointments of the president. So the president can nominate folks for the Supreme Court, for the judiciary, Supreme Court justices, but the Senate has to approve those appointments. So those are all checks and balances to make sure that all the power isn't concentrated in one branch of government.